Guyana. Welcome to another program of The Public Interest. I am Malaika Ramsey. This week, the opposition leader, Brigadier the Honorable David Granger, will focus on the crisis facing our youth. And the main focus this week is the fact that so many of our youths are unemployed. Brigadier David Granger, welcome back, sir.
Thank you very much, Malaika.
All right. Let's jump right into it this week, sir. Why are so many of Guyana's youth unemployed?
Well, that's a big question, and the answer is even more difficult. One is certainly the education system. Too many of our students drop out of school. I reckon, well, by my calculation, one boy or girl drops out of school every single hour of the day in this country. In one day, 24 children drop out. And you can realize what happens over a period of a year. When you consider that the National Grade 6 examinations, which is more or less the hurdle over which children have to pass as they leave primary to get into secondary school, 18,000 children write the National Grade 6 every year. When we see a small number going into the top 10 schools, going into Queen's College and St. Stanislaus and Bishops, we see that maybe as many as maybe 16 or 17,000 do not get into the top primary schools. The problem there is that the educational preparation given in the poorer or the less well-resourced secondary schools does not really prepare the students for the world of work. And I think the biggest problem affecting youngsters going into the field of work is that their educational foundation is normally inadequate. So I think that's the biggest problem. In the schools, many of them drop out or their education is not appropriate. And when they leave school, maybe at the age of 15, 16 or 18, they can't get jobs.
Okay, I know in previous times you've said that other than education, two other crises facing the youth are of course, the employment crisis, which we are discussing, and empowerment. I'd like you to say how you feel the empowerment or lack of empowerment is a problem, linking it to the unemployment problem.
Well, in the education system, we tend to focus narrowly on academic subjects, how many subjects you pass and what grades you got. But when I speak of empowerment, I look at the preparation of young people for citizenship. I want to see young people participating in sport, becoming captains of sporting teams, getting involved in extracurricular activities, clubs, for example, pursuing hobbies, maybe going into the hinterland during the August holidays, becoming scouts, joining non-governmental organizations. And these activities prepare young citizens to assume responsibilities, to make decisions, to meet other people, to become familiar with the Guyanese environment. And this is part of the empowerment process. So that when they become adults, they can actually make decisions, they can actually participate in discussions, they can contribute to molding their own destiny. So that is why organizations such as the Youth Parliament should empower young people by helping them to make the types of decisions which would make them into good citizens. But that's not happening much because we have no youth policy in Guyana.
Okay, before I talk about specific plans that you would have mentioned for youth in the past, you just touched on the Youth Parliament. In Guyana in the past years, we've seen the big announcement and pronouncements about the Youth Parliament. It's doing this. We've seen people even being awarded for their involvement in the Youth Parliament. Your thoughts on it? If it's not up to standard, what are some of the things that you would recommend to have a proper Youth Parliament?
Well, the present People's Progressive Party Civic Administration has created a series of cardboard organizations, including the President Youth Choice Initiative and the President Youth Award, Republic of Guyana. The issue of the Youth Parliament is also part of that cardboard framework that the PPP Civic Administration has created. It has no depth, it is not solid, it does not embrace the aspirations of the majority of young people. And we have called for the Youth Parliament to be brought under the auspices of the National Assembly Because right now it seems to be a creature of the People's Progressive Party civic administration. Nobody knows how people are selected. Nobody knows what impact it has on the wider society after these so-called parliamentary sessions have been held. I had the experience in going to Jamaica as a member of a delegation for the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association several months ago, and two persons were set to represent Guyana at the Commonwealth Youth Parliament. One was the child of a minister, and the other one was an employee of the Office of the President. That cannot be a fair selection of representative young people from the Republic of Guyana. So it is farcical. And the whole spirit of youth parliaments is democracy, and if you're going to choose representatives, the choice should be democratic. But what I'm saying is that there's no impact, there's no measurable impact of this youth parliament on the youth of Guyana. You can't go to Region 7 or Region 8 or Region 9 and say, well, what do you think about youth parliament? They say, well, what's that? So we need to create a youth parliament that is generally and genuinely representative of the youth population of Guyana.
Okay, apart from some sort of empowerment or self-development from a youth parliament, do you believe that a proper planned youth parliament would more or less propel young people into becoming, no offense to you, sir, but better politicians in the future?
It is more than a youth parliament. We've got to go back to the education system, because I feel that some of the requirements for citizenship should take place within the education system. It is in the schools that children learn to debate, they learn to lead as members of sports teams, they become prefects at school. This is all part of the education process, the broadening of the base, cultural base of the students themselves. They learn about music, they learn about culture, they learn about other ethnic groups in the country, they learn about life in different parts of Guyana, in the mountainous areas, in the forested areas, in the savanna areas, and so on. So I believe more must be done in the education system to help to empower young people. So when they leave school, they would have had an experience of travel, they would have had an experience of cultural interaction with other citizens, and much of that is not happening now in the school. When you go to a school, for example, the so-called Reading Hoop Secondary School, where's the playground? Where are the extracurricular activities? It is too narrowly focused on the classroom, which of course are badly equipped anyway. The classroom, there are benches, there are blackboards, and there's chalk. They go in, spend several hours, and come out. But there's no leisure, there's no cafeteria, there's no games room, there's no gymnasium, there's no sports field. And I think this is leading to the narrow cultural basis on which many of our young people are being brought up. As a result of that, and a result of the poor education they're receiving, they're just not ready for the world of work. They're not even ready to become full citizens, to participate in decision making in their communities. There's nothing wrong with young people taking leadership positions, but right now our education system is not training, it's not preparing, it's not equipping young people to take those leadership roles in the communities, and that is the problem. So when we go to the workplace, we don't see that person has the sort of self-esteem and the self-confidence to become a supervisor or a junior manager, or to go on to other forms or higher forms of education and training in his job situation.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about a few of David Granger's initiatives, beginning with what you called PAYE, the Plan of Action for Youth Empowerment, back in 2011. I know, of course, when you spoke about that, it was before the 2011 general and regional elections, and you spoke about basically under that PAYE establishing an annual Youth Week celebration in the month of August. Now, you're not in government, unfortunately. Is establishing PAYE still possible? And what have you done so far to see that becomes a reality?
Well, PAYE, the Plan of Action for Youth Empowerment, is incorporated in a scheme that our party, the People's National Congress, reformed had introduced 7 years ago in 2006 called the YES, the Youth Empowerment Scheme. PAYE is just an aspect of youth empowerment. YES is much broader. It involves preparing youngsters for the achievement of higher education goals at primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. It involves preparing them for the world of work, and it involves preparing them for leadership and good citizenship in the community. We feel that every young person wants to have a good life, wants to have a good job, motor car, house, family, wants to travel, wants to have a good pay packet at the end of the month. And we want to help the youngster to make that possible. And that is what PAYE is all about. It is a system or a method for ensuring that in those three areas, particularly education, but also employment and empowerment, the young person, the young citizen, the young Guyanese will be able to make the best of his or her life. But everything starts with education. And we want to ensure that the education system is such that, apart from the academic qualifications, the young person is exposed culturally, is exposed socially, to other members of the Guyanese community, and to other experiences which could help him or her to make the right decisions more often than not in terms of becoming a good citizen, deciding where to work, deciding what sort of career he or she would like to follow, what part of the country he wants to live. All of these things, all of these decisions are made by the young person, at age 15, 16, 20, up to the age of 20, 21. He's deciding, should I go into law, should I go into accountancy, should I go into medicine, should I become a civil servant, a military officer. All of these decisions are being made. Should I become a farmer, should I become a businessman? But by the age of 18 or 20, that person pretty well knows what he or she wants to do. And we need to enable that person to make the right decision by giving him or her the right type of education. My fear is that if the educational choices are too narrow, too limited, he or she is not likely to make the right choice. If he sees before him a wide range of occupations, I could be a farmer, I could be a manufacturer, I could be a businessman, I could be an accountant, I could be anything I want to be, because I've got the educational foundation to do so. But if it's too narrow, he or she might just want to become a civil servant. Why you want to become a civil servant? Oh, it's a steady job. We want somebody to be able to say, look, with my education, I would like to become maybe a farmer. I'd like to maybe become a manufacturer. I'd like to become a proprietor of a small factory. I'd like to maybe own a fleet of taxis. The world, the whole country is waiting for the next generation. We need engineers. We need people who can go into the hinterland and say, look, I want to build an all-weather road or a highway from Bartica to Mahdia. I want to build bridges between Mahdia and Anai. I want an ambitious young person to come out of our school system, but I don't think it's happening now.
Okay, it basically comes back to, because APNU and David Granger, they're not in government. How possible is it for you to help these young people to achieve their goals? Because I know obviously you're not in government, so there's some amount of limitation on what you can possibly do. I mean, have you done anything thus far to try to bring everything under one umbrella and help the youths to understand that, this is where you should go to become a productive adult or a productive citizen?
Well, I define government in very broad terms, and that I regard the legislative branch as part of government. The executive branch is simply another part of government. The judiciary is another part of government, the third branch of government. So I am in government in the sense that I'm a member of the National Assembly, and I can contribute to debates, I can contribute to molding policy. So as far as the youth are concerned, yes, we may not be on the executive branch You know, we may not have a minister of labor or a minister of education or a minister of human services. But because the National Assembly is the decision-making or the law-making body, we will be able to use our influence to have measures favorable to youth education, favorable to youth employment, introduced in the National Assembly, debated and implemented. Now, we can't force the government, but we can bring bills because we are the majority. We can bring measures to seek the government's compliance. Unfortunately, this PPP administration, at least the President Ramata, has already threatened not to assent to measures which do not have the agreement of his side of the House. Well, that will be a challenge that we have to face. But we, in this particular year, 2013, the year for youth, we will continue to ask questions, introduce motions, and to craft bills which could be helpful to young people. So we will not be able to set up a scheme, a youth employment scheme, for example. We can't build a factory, but we could bring pressure to bear on the executive branch of government to do these things. And that is how we intend to operate.
Okay. Another one of your initiatives I'd like to hear from you about is the Get 10 initiative, I think it was. I know in 2011 it was more or less designed to help young people, to pull young people out of, their little groups, to help them to come out and vote. Do you see such an initiative or anything similar to the Get 10 initiative helping to create some self-empowerment for them, and not just as it relates to politics, but for their own development?
Well, the Get 10 was announced in the context of the Guyana Youth and Student Movement, which is the strongest youth movement in Guyana today. I mean, people hardly hear about the PYO. And even the United Force used to have a movement called the GUYS. Nobody hears about that. But the Guyana Youth and Student Movement is certainly the most dynamic. It actually holds rallies. It actually has outreach. On Friday night you go by Starbucks Square. More likely than not, you'll see the Guyana Youth and Student Movement holding a rally, interacting with people, other young people. So I said it in the context of that organization, that movement, speaking and seeking to get more young people involved in the political process. When I said Get 10, I meant that every member of the Guyana Youth and Student Movement should be able to go out there and encourage 10 friends, 10 relatives to come into the GYSM. But it also went further. It meant that we should aim at getting young people, and people felt that young people were apathetic, but I came upon a completely opposite experience. Young people are dynamic, they're vibrant, and they want to be involved. And what I meant by Get 10 is that more people should be involved in the process. I don't want young people to feel that the political process is a job for old men and women. It is a young person's job to get involved, to become part of the process and help to shape his or her destiny. Because I have a saying in administration, every person eventually would have to be replaced. And in any job I go to, I always plan for succession, that sooner or later every person will have to be replaced. That is the only way an organization would survive. Now, the Get 10 movement helps to promote that process by which young people are prepared to take greater and greater responsibilities. Now, young people need experience, yes, but they also need to come into the organization and be given the scope, given the opportunity to work with their seniors, learn. They'll make mistakes. All young people make mistakes. That's the good part about being young. But by learning from those mistakes, he or she would avoid them in future and eventually make fewer and fewer mistakes. So it is only by the Get 10 movement, by bringing more and more people into the organization, that young people have the experience of actually participating in political action, going into communities, speaking with residents, learning about their concerns, and giving representation to those concerns in the movement and in the National Assembly or in the various fora provided by the political party. For example, in the People's National Congress, which again is the most democratic party in the country, we don't go into a little room to elect our presidential candidate. We do it in an open forum. People have to campaign. So we have a democratic system at the level of the group, at the level of the district or the region, at the level of, we have a general council, we have a central executive committee, we have Congress. And young people are part of that Congress. They do send delegates. They do have representatives, and they can get up and speak. They can advance motions which are in the interest of young people at the Congress of the PNCR. And they can also have their own congresses in GYSM, their own general council, their own committees where they deliberate. So the PNCR is the forum through which I see many young people learning to become better citizens. And I must mention that in addition to the YES, which we are relaunching, we have also restarted something called the BEST, the Burnham Education Scholarship Trust, in which young people are actually being given bursaries of over $30,000. Well, the first bursary will be $30,000, but in every year that person remains in secondary school, that person will get an additional bursary at least of $10,000. That will help the person to acquire books and move through the entire secondary school career. So in this way, we are encouraging young people in their tens, as part of the Get 10 movement. We are encouraging young people to come into a political movement and empower themselves. So it is an important part of the overall education, empowerment, and employment scheme.
I must ask you this, sir. PAYE, Education Nation, the bursary awards which you recently mentioned. Are you not concerned that you yourself and APN, you could be accused of trying to score political mileage, or more or less trying to grab for votes? Because it all comes back to you give me something, I give you something. Are you not concerned that you'll be seen in this light?
I'm concerned if we are ignored. I would be concerned, because this is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to win young people over so that the vision could be much broader. We're trying to win young people so that we can convince them that there is a great life in Guyana. They don't have to think about migrating. They don't have to think about becoming second-class citizens. I want to paint a bright vision for them. That's why during the campaign we spoke of a good life for all Guyanese. And I want the young person to know that a Partnership for National Unity is going to give him or her that good life, good education, good jobs. For example, in the field of employment, I have promised publicly that every graduate, and I might have mentioned it on a previous public interest program, every graduate from university will be given a job within 12 months by a Partnership for National Unity government. Once you graduate from university, within 12 months, the government will find you a job.
But that's somehow, we're not seeing that happening with the PPP government. People are of the view that it's impossible. How can David Granger guarantee us that it's possible?
No, I mean, we don't want to say that it's a government duty, but I am saying that this government is creating in the economy something called jobless growth. The economy seems to be growing. I mean, when you look in some streets, even in Georgia, and you see some buildings which are growing, whereas you used to see 1 or 2 story buildings, nowadays you're seeing 5 and 6 story buildings. Maybe money is obviously coming into the economy. Perhaps it's because of the gold rush. There is a gold boom taking place. I mean, people are becoming fabulously rich. We can afford to have $1 billion seizures in Curacao and elsewhere. So people obviously have a lot of money. But what we want to see is the type of development, the type of economic growth which generates jobs. We don't want jobless growth. We want the type of growth which generates jobs, and that is why I spend so much time speaking about things like agro-processing, speaking about private enterprise, speaking about manufacturing. These are areas that young people could enter. They do not have to stay at the bottom of the ladder socially or economically They can become entrepreneurs in their own right. And we want to guarantee jobs, not in the public service, but by giving them credit. So that a young person who wants to set up even an internet cafe, wants to set up some little cassava factory to make cassava bread, to make farine. We will set up schemes as part of PAYE, as part of YS, so that youngsters could borrow money, maybe $1 million or $2 million, not a lot of money, but enough to enter into a small manufacturing enterprise.
But you could also be accused of steering young people away from agencies and organizations that need people to work. For example, the Guyana Police Force, the fire service, these public entities, the Georgetown Hospital, the medical field.
I mentioned that at the national grade 6 level, we're talking about 18,000 children writing exams every year. As a national leader, I'm thinking about 18,000 jobs. And the police don't need 18,000 jobs, I can tell you that. There is a sort of, I would say, a magical hand that will guide people into areas of employment, into occupational areas where they feel themselves best suited. Some people will want to set up internet cafes, some people will want to go into the civil service, some people will want to go into the defense force, some people will want to become business persons, some people want to go into the hinterland and do mining. But eventually people will pursue courses that they feel would give them the good life. But as a government leader, I want to create the opportunities so that when that person comes out of the school system, he or she has choices. I don't want to narrow the choice to becoming a priest or becoming a civil servant or becoming a soldier. I want that person to have a wide range of choices and say, look, I want to become a businessman, I want to become a farmer, I want to become an entrepreneur, or I want to become a barber, But the choice must be with that young person leaving school. And I want to create a Guyana where there's a wide range of choices, and the education that that person receives must be such that he or she really has a choice. And that is what is going to create a happy country. That's what's going to create a good life for Guyanese.
We're in the first month of 2013, sir, and of course I'm going to use this question in the final moments of this broadcast. Where do you want to see, if I can get specifically from you now, where do you want to see our youths at the end of 2013, in December 2013, and how much can David Granger and the APNU do, along with the PNC, to achieve that goal or those goals?
I want to see our young people in schools, on the sports field, or at work. I want to know that when a youngster comes out, when a youngster goes into school, there's a greater chance of graduation. When that person comes out of school, there's a greater chance of that person getting into an occupation with which he or she is satisfied. I want to see a happy youngster, a happy youth population. I want to see people in Guyana enjoying that good life.
Thank you very much, Opposition Leader Brigadier the Honorable David Granger. This has been another program of the Public Interest. We were discussing the importance of youth and the crises facing our youth. Until next time, I am Malika Ramsey. Goodbye.